Hello, Facebook and Instagram. It is me, Brittany Boles, back with chapter 9 of Finding Starlight, the so far unpublished story of my life as told through the lens of a past life regression session. So we will get right into it. Tonight is a little bit longer of a chapter. If you need to catch up on any of the prior chapters of Finding Starlight, they are available on my website and on YouTube. My website is brittanyboles.com. And again, this is chapter 9 of my so far unpublished creative nonfiction, which means that it's true but kind of fantasy-like, called Finding Starlight. Chapter 9, Blending Like Oil and Fire. I knew things were bad when Amber had her little heart broken. She was still so young and innocent when we moved in with Jane and her kids. Amber hardly remembered life with Mom, so she didn't have any of the baggage that I carried. She just wanted to be loved. So Amber and Jane grew close. She was a cute little girl, affectionate and sweet. She made an impression on people. At one point, she asked Jane if she could call her Mom. We hardly saw our own mom anymore. She was back and forth between California and Minneapolis doing gods know what. Amber just wanted a mommy. Jane, of course, said no. She said her own kids would be jealous. I scowled. It still made me mad. How hard would it have been to just say yes? Her youngest kid was 12 years old. Amber was in 3rd grade, totally displaced, desperate for someone to love. It makes me sick, I confessed to Katrina, who was nodding sympathetically. I continued almost an apology for my outburst. Jane had a lot of emotional issues of her own. Her previous marriage to the father of her kids was an ugly and abusive one. She had major family secrets, which I stumbled onto, but won't be sharing. It's not my story to tell. I will say that Jane suffered greatly, and that it fractured her mind and spirit, I think. Katrina said, "That's fair. I think it's honorable that you can see the pain she endured and respect the privacy of her secrets, even though you have issues with her." I nodded my thanks and went on. Dad was still abusive in a lot of ways. He had stopped the full-on physical attacks, the strangling and whatnot, for the most part, but he was still explosive, verbally aggressive, and way too physical with both me and Jane. She always seemed to be teetering on the edge of a complete mental breakdown, which could have been because Dad was such an asshole, or because she had no coping skills, or because it was so difficult to blend our families. Who knows? She and I had a combative, constant warfare relationship. I tried to get along with her, tried to be a good daughter in all the ways she asked, but I was out of my element. I was strong-willed, intelligent, argumentative. I'm sure I reminded her of Dad in those ways, but she couldn't fight back with him like she could with me. I was both of their scapegoats, and as a result, I led a terrible adolescence. Dad made up this rule that if I made Jane cry, he would make me cry. It was as awful as it sounds. I mean, I guess in the sense that I had a steady place to live and knew that Amber was safe, it was an improvement over life with Mom. But realistically, it was one of the darkest points in my entire life. "There you are, seeing your darkness again," Katrina quietly said, almost as if she was talking to herself. I wonder if we really are seeing the same things. Why don't we go back into your cloud and take a trip to another point in your young life? See what else we can learn. Her voice became musical again. That sounds good, I said. I could use a break from talking. Cloud puffed and grew to its larger, rideable size while taking a lap around the waterfall pool. Gaining momentum and speed, it swooped under me, scooped me up onto its cushy surface, and flew up out of the tree canopy. Katrina easily caught up with us, flying with her own shimmering wings, and perched on a spot next to me. To the riverside, on a Minnesota day, we traveled, coming to a stop above a humongous tree that grew at an odd angle, horizontally but rooted into the earth, like it was laying down to contemplate the water. I love this place, I exclaimed to the cloud and fairy. We lived not far from here. I spent a whole summer riding my bike out here and just sitting on this tree. As had happened before, my acknowledgement of the place and time allowed my consciousness to stream into the moment we had come to experience. I wasn't on the cloud anymore. I was my young self again. Ents, I had read in The Lord of the Rings, are tree people. Not every tree is an ent, but every ent looks like a tree. Compared to humans, ents are very slow creatures. Their days are typically spent in deep meditation, giving them the appearance of being asleep. Most humans would never even notice the difference between an ent and a tree. Fortunately for me, I had a gift for that sort of thing. This ent was in a deep slumber when I first discovered her. Quietly, so as not to startle the ancient creature, I walked up to her mighty trunk, which was curved like an old woman's spine toward the earth. A few relatively young, sturdy branches reached proudly toward the heavens, sprouting a bright green smattering of leaves. Their shadows were just big enough to offer a little shade and spaced so perfectly apart as to provide a nice sunning area in case I should desire it. Everything about this creature, or tree, or ent, as it were, felt like an invitation specifically to me, like the most magical place in the world, like a personal oasis. I pressed my gently glowing palm into her bark and felt her rouse. It was as subtle as the way the ice begins to melt in winter, and as quiet. I felt, rather than heard, a silent invitation to climb upon her back and admire her view of the river. With childlike reverence and awe, I climbed up the broad expanse of her worn, weathered trunk, walking easily across its horizontal surface. The afternoon sun was casting warm rays toward a perfect little indent into which I nestled. The ent and I sat in silence for some time. I listened to her impossibly slow breath and tried to see the world through her eyes. There, across the river, stood hundreds of regular trees framing the valley. The cold blue water rushed toward the Mississippi. In my ent attempt, I managed to view the river's seemingly harmless flow as a great hurry. I slowed my breathing to match my trees. She rustled her branches, sighed, and held me a little more closely. As badly as I wanted her to, I was sure she would not talk to me that day. It takes an ant a very long time to wake up, and she must feel strongly if she is even to consider speaking. A human's life is merely the blink of an eye to an ant. Over the next many weeks, my visits to the tree remained my most special secret. On bright, sunny days like the one we were now experiencing, she was almost excitable. I had brought my notebook and was deep in thought, writing. The weight of the world upon my shoulders. I hid my silent tears and smiled out at my heavy life. I wrote. Even though it seemed that everyone was constantly pointing out how happy I was, my shoulders felt like lead. Holding my head high, I had trained myself to smile through my tears. Then I learned to turn the tears inward, storing them like a cactus after rain. I supposed each compliment was a small victory. They think I really am happy. It's working. After a while, tears became obsolete. I began to comprehend a sorrow deeper than could be expressed in a sob. It was as though my soul itself was slowing down. I wrote, the only times I feel alive are when I'm with my tree. My eyes blurred with suppressed emotion, forcing me to rely on other senses. I found that I could feel the ant's life force. It was palpable, like an invisible current running through and all around her, buzzing slightly and making the hairs on my arms stand on end. It felt a lot like static electricity, but alive somehow. The more I focused on the feeling, the more powerful and attractive it became, like it was drawing me toward it, asking me to connect. There was a particular knot on the tree that seemed to be magnetized, almost glowing. I hesitated, pulling back my hand and resisting the urge to dive into the strange current. My breath caught in my throat, and I found myself unable to think about anything except the overwhelming need to connect to this life force. Finally, I could resist no longer. With great care and caution, I slowly reached for the knot, laid my palm upon it, and plunged fully into the flow. On contact, a powerful magic broke through me. Every drop of pain that I had stored within my bones streamed out of me in a tidal wave of emotion, pouring into the tree where my hand was pressed. I was fire and water, fury and sorrow. For an infinite and indescribable moment of time, I was a pure filament of pain, and the tree was my grounding point, absorbing and accepting the burning flood that had nearly consumed me. Then I was emptied of it. Sobs rocked me back and forth. Images burst into my head as tears streamed down my face. There was my mother turning her eyes away from me as she walked out the door. I watched Dad waste his days in front of the TV, smoking cigarettes and drinking beer. No, I choked as I saw myself being ripped away from my aunt, the angel. Her eyes were bright with tears, which seemed more like sparkles than sadness when she said goodbye. Why, I chanted, rolling my wet cheeks on the soft bark of the tree. Why did we come here? Why couldn't we stay in California with my ocean? Why did my mom leave us with him? Why can't I just have normal parents? Why did my father have to die? Why is this happening to me? Like the sun breaking through the clouds after a thunderstorm, or the way condensation smells on the first day of spring. I heard her whisper, There, there. It was the single most calming sound I had ever heard. So quiet, I almost didn't hear. The Ent's voice was wind flowing through leaves. Why can't you be my mother? I asked her in a watery voice. Compared to her, I sounded raw and loud to my own ears. Everything will be okay, she murmured, and it felt like my body was wrapped in sunshine. Remember who you are. Remember what you are, she sang. My last thought, before I drifted off to sleep, was to wonder what it would be like to be a star, burning in the great sky, with friends like the moon and the sun. Like before, I turned to wakefulness, already back on the cloud, already approaching the waterfall. It was deeply comforting and divinely soft, a contrast to the solid wood upon which I had last lain. A warm, tingly cloud hug squeezed me before it set me back on my mossy seat. I started talking immediately. Life with Dad, trying to become a teenager, trying to figure out how to be a person. It was such a hard time, I confessed to Katrina, patting the already shrinking cloud. It changed back into its mirror-like smoothness, ready to elaborate my words. This time, the cloud did not wait for me to guide it. Gone was the vibrantly colored richness of before. Instead, visions flashed before us with the static quality of old movies. Now I was an adolescent on the cusp of becoming a young woman. I was kneeling on hands and knees, scrubbing the kitchen floor with a bucket of soapy water. I wore jeans and a black hoodie and was listening to loud, angry rock and roll on my headphones. Under the shadow of my hood, my brown eyes were filled with tears. A blink made the tears rush down my face, splashing on the wet floor, and with a soapy rag, I just wiped them away. The scene changed. Now I stood in the kitchen as Dad came toward me, screaming and jabbing in my direction. I backed away from him, but not fast or far enough. He hit me with the back of his hand right in the face, knocking me backward over a chair and onto the floor. Before I could react, Dad was upon me, still yelling. He yanked me up by my wild, curly hair. I was utterly silent, staring at him with a controlled, neutral face, my eyes dark in an attempt to stay calm. He wrenched my hair and dragged me into the bathroom, tossing me into the tub. My stepmother came into the bathroom to join the fray. Her screeching voice and Dad's furious roar continued as they towered over me. I was huddled in the tub, crying now. Dad turned on the icy shower and drenched me, fully clothed, while they continued to berate me, in spite of my shivering, tears, and sobs. The scene changed again, this time to a conversation at the dinner table. Haughtily, I said, I really think it's true that I can do or be anything I want. All we have to do is imagine it. Imagine something is possible, and then it becomes so. Jane replied, that's not possible. You can't imagine anything you want. I mean, I suppose I see what you're trying to say, but let's just be realistic. I am being realistic. I really think it's possible. I mean, people do amazing things all the time. I believe in magic, I argued. Everyone else at the table was either skeptical or mocking, which I staunchly ignored. My stepsister cut in. So you're saying if someone wanted to free dive down to where the Titanic had sunk without any equipment at all. He could do it if he really believed he could. I nodded and opened my mouth to reply, but she said, "That's impossible. He would die." I answered, "Well, I mean, I think it would be possible if he really believed it. Maybe it wouldn't be the way we're thinking about it now. Maybe he would learn to separate from his body and travel down there without a physical body. You know, like astrophysical travel." Jane, my stepmother, argued that's not the same thing at all. First of all, even if that was real, it's not the same as doing whatever you want. The fact remains that a person can't just do anything he wants, not in real life. Okay, we have a snow squall apparently happening in New Hampshire. Raise your hand if you just got the weather alert. Jesus. Anyway, back to the story. Welcome to live video. My stepsister, nope. It was a direct challenge. The air around the table became tense. I still think it's possible. If I want to be famous someday, I will be, I stubbornly declared. "Don't be a fucking asshole," Dad roared, slamming his fist onto the kitchen table hard enough to rattle our plates and glasses. "You don't need to argue with every goddamn thing she says. Be silent the rest of the night. Don't say another word. Don't make any sounds. Don't write anything down. Be completely silent. If I find out that you made any noise at all, you're in for it. You hear me?" I looked scared for a moment as I struggled with how to respond. I knew the order to silence well and how volatile it became if the terms were violated. Dad reached for my face, roughly grabbed my chin, and shook my head up and down. "Yes, Daddy, I hear you. I won't make any sounds for the rest of the night," he mimicked. With a flicker like an old movie reel running out, the scene changed once more. It was a different day, but I had upset my stepmother once again. Dad was calling me names and yelling at the top of his lungs as he prodded me downstairs into his bedroom, jabbing at my back, chest, and shoulders with one finger while glaring through angry eyes. "Pull your pants down and lean over the bed," he demanded. I turned and fought to get past him, pleading and apologizing. He wrenched me around by the shoulders and threw me over the bed, screaming, "I want to see your bare ass, you little bitch. This'll teach you to run your mouth." He lifted a piece of thin wood, a paint stirrer, from a nearby table and furiously smacked my bare bottom until I burst into sobs and begged him to stop. "You want something to cry about? I'll give you something to cry about," he roared, continuing his assault on my bare butt, back, and thighs. I struggled one last time to escape, but he held me down with one hand on the back of my neck and continued to spank me until I finally quieted and lay there, silent and unmoving. The cloud briefly turned black before transitioning to another scene. It was daytime, just after school, and report cards had come in the mail. I proudly waited as my dad opened the envelope. I had received straight A's in all of my classes. "Yeah, good job, he said noncommittally, glancing at the paper and tossing it aside. "Are you proud of me?" I asked. "You did exactly as you were supposed to do. If you did any less well in school, you'd be in big trouble. I expect the best from you. You're a smart girl." A flicker of the cloud meant that we were looking at another scene. It was Friday night, and I sat alone in the basement, slumped on the cold concrete floor with my back against the washing machine. My head was buried in my hands as I cried. Yet again, my dad and stepmom were punishing me, I recalled of that night, forcing me to stay home from a dance. My stepmom's voice replayed in my head and also on the cloud so that we could hear it dubbed over my muffled sobs. You are cold as ice and a motionless stone. You think you're so much better than all of us, so much smarter. Well, you know what? I know you're smart. Oh, yes, everyone knows that. But you, miss, are not better than anyone. Well, what do you have to say for yourself? Outside of this home, you are little Miss Popular, and you know what? I know you're fooling everyone. I know the real you. You would give the shirt off your back for any stranger out there. But here in this home, you are selfish, emotionless, manipulative, and lazy. To Katrina, I said, Jane's words hurt. It took all of my effort to try to stay calm in that house and to bite my tongue when everyone was so cruel and horrible. I felt like I was under siege in a psychological war. There was nothing I could say or do to keep myself out of trouble, including saying nothing. After a pause, I added, I'm not cold or heartless. I never have been. The cloud continued when I left off, with a scene in my bedroom, arguing with Jane. If you don't want your clothes, we'll take them. She was mocking me in the too high voice she used when she was particularly amused at herself. Calmly and patiently, I tried to explain, it's not that I don't want my clothes or that I dislike them. I love my clothes. You know how much I have to beg Dad to buy new things. So please, just listen to me. It's not about not wanting my stuff. At church today, I saw a video about a guy living in the ghetto who just opened up his house and all his stuff to anyone who wanted to come in. He didn't have a whole lot, but he recognized that where he was at in Detroit, nobody had anything. They had even less than him. So he decided to give away or share what little he did have, and it's making a huge difference. All I want to do is minimize what I have so that, for one thing, I can focus more on what I'm trying to do with my life instead of what I'm wearing. And for another thing, so that people who really need clothes more than I do can have some nice things. I just want to make it so that I have like 5 outfits. I've already decided. I'm giving everything else away. I finished in what I hoped was a matter-of-fact sort of way. Oh, so that's it, is it? She said, voice dripping with contempt. You want to help people. How about you start by helping us? How about you take some initiative around here and do things without being asked? Do a good job on your chores. Be nice to us for a change, instead of focusing on the outside world all the time. Ugh, if they could only see who you really are, like I do. Mercifully, the cloud let her voice fade out. It changed locations, showing us the church that I had referenced. I was standing at the lectern on stage in front of the hundreds-strong congregation in the newly remodeled, huge sanctuary. The pastor had asked me to share my story, the tail end of which the cloud was now displaying. Like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I have spent time in the furnace, I was saying. Literally, when my mom burned down our apartment, and figuratively, like when her boyfriends molested me. I have experienced pain and suffering in my short life, and I have felt abandoned in it. There were times when I was younger that we had no food in the house at all, except for what we'd gotten from food pantries. Thank God for food pantries. But they don't think about the whole meal. We would have hamburger helper, but no meat or milk. I remember going to my neighbor's house to borrow the other ingredients just so my sister had something to eat that day. I remember finding my mom stinking drunk on the steps of our apartment in the middle of the night, hearing her stumble and afraid she would fall. I'd walk down there and half carry her upstairs to put her to bed. I remember being so sick with food poisoning that I couldn't even move, and my mom leaving to go to the bar. She came back that night with some very loud friends and did drugs right next to my bed. My home life now isn't great. I have to beg my dad just to let me come to church at all. I have to bite my tongue, smile, and pretend that everything is okay, even though my heart is breaking every single day. So yeah, I have been in the furnace. I have sat through the flames and held my head up, trusting that my faith would protect me. And I'm standing here today, aren't I? Maybe God spared me for all these years, through everything, just so I could stand here in front of you all and tell you not to lose heart, not to give up. Trust and believe and stay strong in your hearts, knowing that just when the flames get highest, he will appear for you. He will come, and you will have sat through the fire just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego sat in the flames, and just like me, you will not have been burned. The congregation rose to their feet, cheering and praising God. There were many tear-streaked faces in the crowd. The cloud then showed us another room in the same church, presumably on a different day, filled this time with teenagers. A band was playing worship music. In a long, flowing skirt, I twirled and danced through the room. My face was an expression of pure bliss. Rapidly, the cloud moved to another church scene. Now, we saw a friend sitting next to me in the grass outside. We were talking in solemn voices. What I think I really need to do is teach myself to see through her eyes, I said. But she is wrong. She treats you terribly, and I don't want you to see yourself how she sees you. It's distorted. It's not right, she argued. I held up my hand to stop her from saying more. Katie, I know that. You know that. We've talked about it. I've tried everything we can think of to make the fighting stop. I've tried apologizing, doing more chores, talking to her more openly, not talking to her. The only thing I haven't tried is truly believing that she's right. Jane does see me differently than I see myself, or than you see me, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. Maybe I can end our arguments sooner, make a little more peace in our house if I try something radical. Katie smiled and said, "Radical faith. You're right. That's kind of our thing. It is what Jesus would do. I know it is, but we aren't him. We're only human, and I don't know how you can do it." I replied firmly, "I have to try." In the next scene, an argument with Jane came into focus. I was sitting on a bed, crouched into myself, looking as small and weak as I could. She stood in the doorway with one hand on her hip and the other pointing at me. "You're right," I said. "I've been intentionally sabotaging my housework in order to hurt you. And I'm sorry I did that. I guess I was just seeking attention and trying to manipulate everyone. I can see how I'm causing trouble between you and Dad, and I'm very sorry. What can I do to earn back your trust?" She replied, "Nothing. I don't even care anymore. The damage is done. Your dad and I are getting a divorce, and it's all your fault. I hope you're happy." "I'm not happy," I said as she turned to leave. "I'm sorry." She paused long enough to seethe. "Well, that's That's a little too little, a little too late, isn't it? I stayed where I was, waiting for the inevitable explosion. A few minutes later, Dad stormed in to finish the job. He grabbed me by the arm and yanked me up to standing. You want to tell me why my wife is telling me she's leaving me? He demanded through gritted teeth, not letting go of my arm. She says it's because you can't stand to be around me anymore. She says it's because she can't stand to be around me anymore. I told him as calmly as possible. You mean to tell me that you can't seem to figure out how to... He used his other hand to jab me in the chest, adding emphasis to each word. Fucking get along with Jane, with kind, sweet little Jane, my wife. He stared at me, face close to mine, waiting for an answer. When none came, he shook me by the shoulders. Fucking answer me, he roared. I don't know what to say, I said, scared. Tell me why you can't fucking get along with your stepmother, he said, shoving me onto the bed. I'm trying, I pleaded. I don't know what else to do. He hit me in the fresh bruise on my chest. Figure it the fuck out, or you're really going to be in trouble. He paused for effect and then demanded, you hear me? Do you fucking hear me? What are you going to do? It took me a little too long to find words, so he grabbed my chin and squeezed, miming, I'm gonna figure it out, Daddy. When he released my aching face, I could taste blood. I nodded. He left. I burst into uncontrollable sobs, shoving my fists over my mouth to try to muffle the sound. Tears poured from my eyes. My body shook the whole bed as I didn't dare to move. The cloud shook itself, spraying misty droplets of silver into the air. They sparkled in the sunlight and transformed into snowflakes that floated onto the forest floor, shone for a moment, and melted. It was utterly distracting and a beautifully calming sight to see. I was grateful. Not a lot of happy times. Huh? I asked myself, the cloud, and Katrina, when the last snowflake had disappeared into the moss. Cloud came to rest on my lap, vibrating like a purring cat. I patted it. They didn't get divorced, by the way. I'm still not sure if that's a good thing or not, but at least no one can say that it was my fault in the end. The best part about my life at that time was escaping from it, I told them. Whether by burying myself in a book or the times I went to Arizona, I did better when I just wasn't home, you know? And that concludes Chapter 9 of Finding Starlight by me, Brittany Boles. I don't really know what to say. That was kind of an ugly chapter. Again, if anybody treated you like this garbage, I'm really, really sorry. Every day you guys are reaching out to me in DMs, telling me, you know, that you're grateful for me talking about this, that you're grateful for me speaking up about it, that it's giving you courage and giving you strength. And so that's exactly what I'm trying to do out here. I want to tell this story to millions. So if you know Reese Witherspoon or Ellen, please let them know. And if you have anything to say to me on comments or in DMs, please reach out and know that I'm always here to listen. We rise together, or not at all. Thank you for listening. I'll go live with Chapter 10, Arizona Sky, next Wednesday. Is that Christmas? I don't know. We'll figure it out. All right. Thanks so much. See you soon.